Hello, welcome to Quack Co, the board game channel where every video is 10 minutes or less guaranteed, and today I'm going to be bringing you some tips and tricks, some rules you might overlook on one of our favorite little abstract games, Mythic Mischief from Ivy Studios. I've got all these rules sketched over here on a pad so I won't miss any, and so I can bring them to you as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, when it comes to setup, most of you are aware of the starting guides that you have actually here in the core book. Towards the front part of it, it walks you through some of these locations where you can set up your walls, set up your different terrain, and begin the game. But if you haven't paid attention recently, or you've always played based off of that one system, you should try drafting at some point in the future. This is where you actually place out the rubble and the walls based off of a few constraints. They have to go into empty open spaces. The walls can never be on the edge of the board and can never entirely block off a whole area. After that, you're going to have a total of 4 rubble and 10 walls per map that you're playing with. If you're playing a higher player count, you might have more maps on the table. Specifically with 4, you'd play with 2 full map boards. And one at a time, you'll choose to place out and figure out the design of the tableau. This can be a fun way to add a little bit of depth to the beginning part or the setup part of the gameplay itself. One rule that I find a lot of people double check or overlook from time to time, it's an easy one to forget but really can change the balance of the game. Whoever is going second in turn order gets 1 free tome to add anywhere onto their board. This matters because the person that's going second is always a little bit behind the lead when it comes to capturing and triggering endgame. That 1 tome can help level the playing field, and it's just fun to have more powers and more abilities. The Tomekeeper. As the Tomekeeper moves, the Tomekeeper is going to have a few movement restrictions that have to be followed. First and foremost, when the Tomekeeper moves on top of a cluttered space, it will cost the general 2 movement points. If the Tomekeeper is trying to reach, let's say, an end tile, if it was on top of a cluttered space here, the Tomekeeper, if he only has 1 movement point left, would not jump on top of that space. Instead, he would stand off to the side and not resolve his final movement. So, important to pay attention to. Now, there are some abilities, like, of course, the Distract that allows you to break that rule and drag the Tomekeeper or drag other players up onto clutter spaces. But when it comes to standard movement rules, the Tomekeeper will not rush beyond his limit. Okay. Before and after lunch. If you happen to trigger all of your before lunch locations, the 1, 2, and 3 that the Tomekeeper is trying to get to, and there is still movement left with the Tomekeeper is going to spend the rest of his movement trying to get back to this center Mythic Mischief badge right there. The reason for this is you don't actually go through the cleanup process and establish the new hierarchy or the new locations in the after lunch card until the cleanup phase after all your turn has resolved. So, if the Tomekeeper is left with movement and no location to pursue, he wants to go straight back here to the center of the board. Your boost ability. Again, this is one when I first started playing this game was really easy to overlook for me, and still, I have to remind myself that I can do it. If you're playing a classic 2-player version of this, after your turn, when you're going through the cleanup phase of your board, you're adding tomes to your locations, you get 2 free boost abilities of your dice. This can take a die that doesn't have any natural ability and move it up by 1, or could move your move up by 1 itself. Now, it does not move both of your move die, because everyone has 2 die in that location. Instead, it would boost the farthest one by a single pip up. This is a very easy thing to overlook, very easy thing to ignore, very worthwhile to remember that you have this because those abilities come in clutch when it's necessary. Okay, let's talk about dice exhaust and dice stay. There are some rules here that might be some of the more confusing elements of the game. If you've spent a boost ability on one of your die, like if I spent it here on this distract, so I have 1 distract point, and I did not spend any distract during the course of this turn, this game phase, I would not drop that down during this next cleanup phase. But let's say, for instance, I'd boosted my animate up to level 2, and I'd only spent 1 of those cycling it down from 2 available to 1 available. I would, during the cleanup phase, have to drop this all the way back down to wherever the beginning track is. This means from round to round, I could continue boosting the same thing up higher and higher as long as I wasn't spending any of the resources on it. The moment I spend any of the resources, all of them are going to come off the board, so use them wisely, use them sparingly. Along with that, same thing's true up here with movement. If I've spent any movement, all of my movement is going to collapse. If I haven't used any of it though, it will hold right where it's positioned. So, a weird little caveat that doesn't usually happen, but worth mentioning. If all of your spawn zones are occupied here on the board, what do? So your spawn zones are going to be determined based on the card that you have, the after lunch or before lunch special. And if someone is standing in every single potential zone or something is blocking every single potential zone you can find, you are then going to be able to spawn wherever you would like on the board. It's just an open spawn zone, like you did at the very beginning of the game, like you did at the initial setup. And then the final thing that is worth knowing, the final thing worth going over, has to do with variance. There are a few different ways to play this game. 2 players, just a classic head-to-head. You can also implement some of your more crunchy modes to that, where you're playing with some time trials that you have to war against. You have 3-player, which is going to be a 2 versus 1, where you're working together against a unit of factions. And then you have 4-player, which is really fun if you integrate blitz mode into it as well, because then you have 2 full boards, 2 full Tomekeepers, 4 factions here on the table, and all of you are going to be warring together. Along with that, the rulebook actually works through some of the setup guidelines and some of the rule guidelines for if you have the Master Collection box, or whatever it is, the giant trove box, you're going to be able to host tournaments with this game as well. So if you have a few friends coming over, 4 or 6 friends popping over, and you feel like playing a quick little abstract game, go ahead and pop a few of these boards out onto the table and see who is going to be the reigning champion of them all. So, those are a few quick rules, a few quick things that I tend to either have to remind myself or have a tendency to overlook when I sit down to play this game. Mythic Mischief, absolutely lovely game, one of our favorite abstracts. Really glad that I got a chance to sit down, play it, destroy Shira once again at it. And with that, hopefully we've given you a few things to check off your list next time you're sitting down to get this one to the table. See you next time.